Welcome to Geometry, Unit 1, Lesson 1. Unit 1 is designed to give you some basics and building blocks to learn more complex concepts in geometry. This lesson in particular, we identify points, lines, and planes. We are going to be naming and sketching geometric figures. So whenever we start a lesson, we start with an objective in mind, someplace we want to get to and understand. So these geometric figures we're going to define and sketch today are considered undefined terms, okay? So points, lines, and planes are considered undefined terms. They don't have formal definitions, but there is an agreement about what they actually mean. So the first term we're going to talk about is a point. And when we talk about a point, we say that it has no dimension. It is represented by a dot. So when we draw a point, we represent it by a dot. We name points with capital letters. So we always name a point with a capital letter. Could be A, B, C, any letter of the alphabet can name a point, right? That's gonna be the most common way we name points. Now lines. When we talk about lines, we say that lines have one dimension, right? So this line to the right here has 2 points on it, point A and point B. So we can name a line by the points on it, 2 of the points on it, AB with 2 arrows, or BA, 2 arrows. So the way we name a line, the order doesn't really matter, because we could talk about going from A to B or B to A and extending beyond either one of those points. We can also name lines with a single letter, and that's where this little cursive L comes in. So we could call that line L. Now that's going to be a little less common because that can get confusing at certain points. So just think that we'll be naming lines mostly based off of their points, right? And then building up, planes. A plane has 2 dimensions. We say planes are 2-dimensional. And it's a shape that looks like a floor or a wall. But just like a line extends to infinity in both directions, a plane extends to infinity in all directions, up, down, left, or right, okay? And planes, what I like to do is I like to name planes by at least 3 points. So this plane, we could name this plane ABC. We could name this plane CBA, BAC, BCA. The order doesn't really matter in planes either, okay? Another way we can name planes is by a single letter. So in this plane, I could name this plane M because this capital M here is not actually a point. The way I know it's not a point is there's no dot next to it. So we can name that plane a few different ways. For the most part, we're going to name planes using 3 letters or 3 points, okay? So planes are a little more complex. When we define a plane, it's got to be through any 3 points that don't all lie on the same line. That's how we form a plane. So any 3 points that aren't on the same line. When we talk about the terms collinear and coplanar, points are collinear when they lie on the same line. Same linear line. Collinear points are on the same line. Coplanar points, same concept, but they're points that are on the same plane, okay? So what I'm going to get into is how to name lines, how to give other names for planes, and then talk about collinear, coplanar. So for line LN, let's look at that line really quick. That line is formed right here. So we could name this line a bunch of different ways, okay? A simple way, I could just reverse and say NL, since the order doesn't matter, okay? Another way I could name it is I could use another point that's on that line. So I notice point M is on that line, I could name it MN. If I can name it MN, I can also name it NM. And I'm going to give one more. I know it said 2, but I'm going to give as many as I can possibly give you, okay? So I could use that LM. ML, right? I could also use that little b, lowercase b, to define that line, because that b is not a point. That b names the actual line, okay? Moving on to the next example, another name for plane Z. Plane Z can be named by any 3 points not all on the same line. So if I'm going to name plane Z, I can't use LMN because they're all on the same line. So I'm going to have to use some variation with the point P. So I could do LPM. LP and M aren't all on the same line. I could use LPN and any variations of those. So those are kind of interchangeable. As long as I pick 3 points that aren't all on the same line, I'm good, okay? So I know I gave you 2, another name. You don't have to give me 1, really. So just think about it that way. Next, naming 3 points that are collinear. 3 points that lie on the same line. There's really only one option here. L, M, and N. Point L, point M, and point N. Those are the only ones. Now Q and M are collinear, but there's only 2 of them on that line, right? And then 4 points that are coplanar, 4 points that are part of the same plane. For that, I would say L, M, N, and P. Those are all on the same plane. You look at that little sheet here. They're all part of that little sheet, okay? So moving ahead, we're going to have things called got it questions, which are kind of checks to see your understanding. So what I'd like you to do right now is try to solve this or answer these questions on your own, and then pause the video, and then I'm going to work through it and you can check your work, okay? So pause the video. I'm going to wait a second, give you a chance to pause, and then I'm going to explain. So this says, give 2 other names for line MQ, okay? So one other way I could name line MQ is I could name it QM. And I want to make sure I'm using those arrows, okay? That's an important thing. And I want to make sure that we're using the right notation, because things get tricky later on, and there's different things that can be named the same way, and that arrow's the only differentiation, okay? Then, another way I could name MQ is if you look at the bottom here, A, that little a, I could name it line A, okay? That's another way to name it. Next part of this question. Name a point that is not coplanar with L, N, and P. So look at L, N, and P. There's only one point that's not part of that plane on this whole diagram, and that is point Q. Q doesn't lie on this little sheet. Q is on this line poking through it, kind of, okay? So that would be the only point that's not coplanar with those other points. So what I'd like you to do now, this video is going to end. You're going to go through some more steps in the lesson, and you're going to finish these notes.